Welcome to the Terminology Leading Practices stream of the SNOMED CT Expo 2023. My name is Peter Groves-Williams, and I am a technical specialist at SNOMED International. I will be moderating today's session. All questions will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation. Online attendees, please use the Q&A button to type your questions to the presenter. On-site attendees, please use the microphone provided in the room. I'm now pleased to introduce Catherine Hong of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, who will then herself introduce Jay Lyle from JP Systems, who will be presenting Supporting Interoperability Across Standards, finding from the CCDA-FHIR Transforms Development and Implementation. Catherine, please proceed.
Thank you. I'm Catherine Hong, and I want to welcome you all to our presentation. As Associate Director of Terminology Operations within the Department of Veteran Affairs at the national level, we see lots of interoperability issues. And as Dr. Campbell talked about in his keynote, we do not want silos. So as you can tell, we are involved in this community working on this HL7 project to support interoperability for our veterans. So really for us at the core is what is the value to the veteran. In order for us to engage in something, we have to understand that at the end of the day, we are providing value back to the veteran. And since 85% of veterans receive their care in the community, the CCDA-FHIR mapping effort can be leveraging the wisdom of the community. And we need that, just like was discussed earlier in Keith Campbell's presentation. So I want to thank some of my partners. First, my partners, JP Systems, and also from Oracle Health, AI department, we have Natalie Agassi. And I just want to say my federal team, I serve under Dr. Steve Brown. Many of you may know him. He's a longtime wonderful informaticist. And I work with Dr. Sarita Kinney, Dr. Jonathan Kilborn, Dr. Sarah Malden, Dr. Lauren Stevenson, Melanie Laux, Pam Noble. Those are our federal team. It's not a very big team, but small but mighty. And I just want to thank them. And I want to say that we are on a journey to be a highly reliable organization. And efforts like this, where we do leverage the wisdom of the community, is where we will be very strong together. And I want to introduce Jay Lyle, who I've had the pleasure of working with for about 15 years as a contractor to the Department of Veteran Affairs. And with that, Jay, would you come up and explain the project and tell everyone all about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, I thought it was very fortuitous that Keith had that point about breaking down silos, because this is a big one, and we would very much like to break this one down. Here we are. So this was a project to map CCDA to US Core FHIR, and with a couple of objectives. One very general, they're both published by the same organization. They really ought to be commensurable somehow, and that seemed like an obvious win. But of course, the other issue is we need specific use cases and specific funding and specific objectives. So one of them was from the Oracle team, who has a very FHIR-like repository, and they wanted to produce CDA documents for public health. And that was not, there was no official way to do that. Lots of implementers do this sort of thing, but they don't share how. So there's no shared consensus on what these things mean. So we started the project to provide definitive guidance. I'm going to do these slides fairly quickly because I want to get to the content. Tactically, we're gonna map A to B. Let's see. Let's move on here. We wanted to leverage a prior project that told you how to build CDA-like documents in FHIR. And so there's some administrative difficulties in sort of aligning and joining those two projects, but we've gotten over most of that. There are some concerns around the gaps. In order to get done, we want to finish, we had to scope very tightly to the CCDA on the CDA side and to US Core on the fire side, because both specs are practically infinite. So we had to draw some boundaries. And then the other thing we've done is we are doing the mappings that we can do. And if we find something that cannot be mapped, we mark it down as a gap. And then in a second phase in the future, we hope we'll figure out, okay, which of these are important? How many of these do we have to do to make this safe for actual clinical use rather than secondary use? And so that's our phasing philosophy. Here's many different organizations have been participating. Catherine mentioned several. I think Diameter Health and the VA and Oracle and Google and More Informatics, right? John Damore have been very helpful. And then many other organizations come to the Connectathons and get what they can out of it. We know there are many other implementers who are doing this work. And if you know someone who's doing this, please encourage them to come and participate and share, because the more eyeballs we have on this work, the more trustworthy it will be when we're done. So we have some key challenges. Again, the maps are lossy. We are not fixing all the gaps at this point. We're finding them. So as we get more funding and more time, and as we move forward, we'll work on fixing those gaps to make them safe. So there are some big questions about where the problems come from. And the biggest one is really around the paradigm. There's a document paradigm and there's an API paradigm, and the document paradigm has lots of explicit factors that are asserted about documents. A document is holistic. It's signed, attested by someone. It has a specific context with a date and a setting, and all those things are important to interpret the contents of the document. And there's a very complex model of how context conducts through the bits of the document. Whereas the API, every individual statement can stand alone. You can query on a specific vaccination or a specific observation, and you get that observation, and it needs to be able to convey that context for itself. So there's a much more granular and ad hoc sort of way of handling this sort of thing. So we're beginning the provenance work now. We're just finishing up the ballot comments from May, and we'll have another ballot next May, and that will introduce provenance. So all these really naughty questions will be in that ballot. And several more specific differences, like the way that the data types are designed to handle things like negation and translation, et cetera, et cetera. A couple more general examples. In CDA, we have sections that tell you what you're looking at. So there's a vitals section that has a vitals code. And when you pull a vital out of the vitals section, it has a link code for the vital, but it also has the section code that tells you that it's a vital. So if you put it in a FHIR resource, you can give it the link code that tells you what it is. In the US Core, you must also give it a category that tells you that it's a vital, so that the vitals component of the receiving system knows which screen to put it on. That works fine. There's also a results section in CDA, which contains the lab findings and any other finding. So when you take it over to the FHIR side and put it in the US Core, you need a way to figure out that it's a lab finding rather than a social determinants finding or some other observation. And there's no way to do that other than take the link and go look it up and figure it out for yourself. So that's the kind of thing that we're running into, where there are just different assumptions about the granularity of what you're putting on into the payload. The CDA data type for codes has a translation. FHIR doesn't. It does have an original flag, but it's not entirely clear what that means, and I don't see it used a lot. So it's not maybe a very good substitute. Sometimes you need, the CDA has a negation indicators that flip the semantics of whatever they're on. So you can, in FHIR, you can use a code from SNOMED for no allergy to latex. In CDA, you would have to go figure out what the latex code is so that you can flip the negation indicator on that. They're talking about changing that, which is, I understand the impetus to change it because of this problem. The solution may be worse than the disease, but we'll see when they bring it to ballot. They will be balloting CDA again in January. So if you're interested, please comment. Entity status. FHIR has separate resources for medication requests and statements and different phases of the medication cycle. In CDA, there's a medication act observation. If you're going to apply a medication tomorrow, it would be in the intent mood, INT, and if you applied it yesterday, it would be in the event mood, EVN. But for a prescription or an active order that has been taken in the past and will be taken in the future, it's not entirely clear how the CDA semantics do that. So these are things we're wrestling with right now as we address ballot comments. We don't have, we do have an answer, but it would take 30 minutes to tell you what it is, so I won't. This one has not been a problem. I expected to see issues with findings of presence turning into findings of history of, but everything is point in time at point of record anyway. So far this has not been an issue. I'll delete this slide next time. The axes in CDA, it's based on the RIM, which is a very global universal model that can model anything, and as a result is very abstract, which is why it didn't really get traction. It was too difficult to implement. But it does tell you things like in the, let's see, is this the next slide? Yes, it is. I'm going to go ahead and show you. This is a CDA snippet of a known allergy, and this is a FHIR known allergy. And so the CDA has a participant for the substance that is causing the reaction. So if this were a presence, you would have a code here for some sort of substance. And in FHIR, you do the same. You have a code, and you would put a substance code here if there was an allergy to a substance. But if there's an absence, you would just put the known allergy code right there in the same property. So that the model is supporting two different axes, whereas in SNOMED, it's one axis. So if you have an absence, that is null, and we pull the absence indicator up here to this logical Boolean indicator flag, which causes lots of interesting discussions. So there's distinctions in the axes and how we record this stuff. So if you get one of these negative codes, you need to do more work. So far, the work seems tractable. It can be done. It's complex. It may be error prone, but the maps themselves seem workable. So again, more comments on the ballot would be welcome that next May. Here are I have two sort of deep examples of the kinds of things we're looking at, and this is still in the allergy domain. And the CDA, actually, I'm going to go back again. The CDA uses a very interesting pattern where they use the code as an assertion. It's basically saying, yeah, I have nothing to add. Ignore me. All the semantics are down here in the value, and the value tells you, oh, this is an allergy to drug, and that's telling us what the semantics are. In FHIR, the semantics they're baked right into the resource. If you get this resource, that's what we're talking about, even though sometimes it's not. So this code that we just looked at is one of these guys on the left of this screen. There are 9 values right now in this display. And in FHIR, these pre-coordinated values are post-coordinated. There's a type that tells you basically the mechanism, and there's a category that classifies the substance. It's not real clear how useful this is. If you know the substance, and it may be more than one of these things, and you can have more than one in the spec. But your order check shouldn't care which one it is. The type may be more useful. But we see that these propensity doesn't really have a match over here, and that has caused some consternation. The reason these things are red is one team said, oh, there's no match. We can align these standards better by removing these red codes from the spec, and now we'll have perfect mappability from A to B, when in fact, this type is a optional field, leaving it blank and saying there's an allergy intolerance resource classified as a food category is exactly, or pretty close to exactly, what this propensity code seems to me to mean. So I'm arguing to have them not removed. Opinions welcome. The dark red one has actually been deactivated in SNOMED. And there's discussion about keeping it in the value set anyway, because people use it. So that will be another interesting discussion. So long story short, this is not a problem. These codes can all be mapped to FHIR losslessly. And anytime you get a CDA document with one of these members, we don't really have a problem. We have a little, it looks messy, but it seems to work. Whereas going the other way, we do have a problem. Again, we can still map, we can still provide the data, but it will be lossy. So the FHIR category isn't just food and drug, it's environment and biologic as well. So if you have a biologic, we don't really have a CDA code for that. Now, we could add a code for that to CDA. At the moment, what you could do is there's a workaround, and that would be use the general code in the code, and then actually constrain this substance to biologic. It seems like that would semantically provide the information you want, but it would be a very different pattern. So anyway, I can envision a fairly simple, elegant solution to this to make these align much better, which would be to use both the codes on the CDA side as well. We are not doing that yet. We hope maybe we'll do that when we get to the fixing cycle. The other domain we were looking at in more detail, again, this is not a urgent emergency for the mapping effort, because the FHIR routes are not constrained, so you can do what you want there, and we don't have a ground stop for the mapping work. But we hope that FHIR will adopt one. Right now, the SNOMED is constrained to the FDA and CIT CEDAR codes, and FHIR has an example binding to SNOMED. So we looked at the entire SNOMED axis or branch of routes of administration and tried to do some matches. And if you look at the numbers, we got a lot of matches. We got about half, a little over half. But we also have found a lot of categories of mismatch. So one thing we would like to do or to see is a harmonization between the CEDAR codes and the SNOMED codes. So the CEDAR is pre-coordinating, a classification of rate with your intravenous route. So is that appropriate? Well, it seems useful. It also seems wrong for the specific SNOMED axis. We have places where we have regimes and therapies and procedures where the boundary between the route and the procedure seems a little blurry. We have places where the FDA or the CEDAR list includes things like intraventricular route without telling you which sort of ventricle, which SNOMED tends to do, and a handful of other. You can read these. I don't need to go through all of them. So anyway, we can come back to this slide if you like. Again, here's some numbers on how many matches we were able to do. And here's our contact information. The bottom is the project site in the HL7 Confluence site. So you can go there, you can get to the ballot, you can get to the mappings in process, you can get to the meeting schedule if you want to participate in any way, shape, or form. And with that, I will ask if there are any questions.
Thank you. Jay will now take questions, as he said. As a reminder, if you're in the room, please use the microphone provided.
Thank you for the presentation, Jay. I was wondering, have you done this using the Vesta system or on the new installations of the Oracle system at the VA sites?
This is all done in Excel.
In Excel,
Yeah,
so it's outside the EHR.
We are not implementing it. Would you like to?
I'd like to comment on that. So we have implemented this in Oracle already. And we made sure that the Vista system has a visibility and all the brain work, power work there. So we make sure that our maps are aligned. And this is actually was the premise of the project, making sure it's all transparent and aligned.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question here, but I'll take one from the floor
Probably
first.
as too simple of a question from any provider. When you're doing the mapping project here, and this is primarily designed to help us get information from broader community into the VA record, correct? Well, actually,
That's our interest.
yes,
But the
yes,
project is a
Right.
standards project, right?
Right, right. So if we're trying to do that within the Cerner system there, or the VA system then, how much of that, given this, will be able to be consumed directly without having to just exchange the information? How much of it will be actually consumed right into the records?
I think there are two parts of the question, right? One question, one part would be whether the maps are available for everybody, right? Yes, this is why we, Oracle is very supportive of quality of data. And that's why I'm here. That's why we're all here. So we made sure that our mapping solution maps and transforms are available for community to consume. And you have seen the participants. We regularly conducting connectathons and variety of companies participate in our connectathons. And we make sure that the maps that the samples that they're providing for our review are aligned. And we have a whole process, entire process. It's just unfortunately not enough time to really go into details related to our process, because how it started, we, Oracle, provided 30 different concepts. Then Jay and the team and Catherine and her team went through the spreadsheets, and they come up with a better format. And then they consulted with their extended teams, making sure it makes sense. And then we involved more, I would say, more companies to participate, and then companies that believe that they are implementers, so they solely into implementers, they join us later on the connectathon. So we so far had 3 connectathons, and we're going to continue connectathons, because we want to make sure that we can vet out as much as possible, because we, Oracle, we consuming. So now your question, we are consuming the data. And I, as being a provider and being, I guess my passion is quality of the data, right? And making sure provide the burnout is very important for me, as well as reconciliation. You know that providers, every visit, they needed to reconcile major patient artifacts such as allergy, immunizations, and medications. And unfortunately, the way it's given to them, many pages. It's impossible to figure out what to do with these artifacts. Are they the same or not? This is why we have a specific product that supports this aspect of duplication. So we deduplicate as much as we can, but we get stuck at terminology level a lot of times, or sometimes we get stuck at the level of the structures. They're not interoperable. So this is why we want to make this community aware that these majorly exchangeable standards like V2, FHIR, and CCDA, they require more work. We can't just sit around and say, oh, they are interoperable. And I want to make sure that we don't lose any information. And meanwhile, what we do in Oracle, we are looking at the quality of the information that we receive. So another step that we want to take is to look at the quality of the patient artifact and make a decision whether this specific artifact can be consumed and played in the deduplication process. And this is something that we have a solution for, and we created a specific scoring mechanism for that. And we're trying to see whether our clients would be would they accept this approach, because it's really hard to keep the quality, right? And then we have more ideas how to improve.
Quick note, I think part of the question is, can you ingest the fire? And I think there's not a lot of that going on across boundaries these days, but in the VA it is going on. So yes, within the walls. Yeah.
Thank
Is that-
you. And apologies for not providing Dr. Agassi with a proper introduction then. Thank you. Right. Time for one very quick question. No? Okay, in that case, we will conclude this session. Thank you very much to Catherine, Natalie, and Jay. Online delegates can join another session through the event lobby. Thank you very much.